It's a Garrison Price for Tuesday, March 4th, 2025, coming to you from the Nation Network studio, built by Arbor Lee here at the historic Wall Center. In this show, a presentation of Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today. Bet on a huge range of markets. So, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code NATION when opening that account. Mansa Harrison alongside Blake Price, four-time Juno Award winner Mike Rogerson, hitting switches, conducting things. We have a big show for you as we gear up for the final Vancouver Canucks game before Friday's National Hockey League trade deadline. The Canucks are back at practice today. There's some happenings there. And after they're done with the Anaheim Ducks tomorrow at Rogers Arena to kick off a 5-game homestand, that's it. They won't play again until Friday evening against the Minnesota Wild.
After the fact.
Some hours after the trade deadline has come and gone. So plenty to discuss here, including where things stand with Brock Boeser, some of the other UFAs, the draft capital, the cryptic report that Darren Dreger gave us yesterday with regards to the Canucks seeking a forward, a center with term. We'll discuss it all here on today's program. But we start with the Surrey Mitsubishi poll question. And I don't know about you, but I have been busy checking New York Rangers box scores for the last month.
Just to hurt yourself?
Well, I mean, I check box scores every night anyways, but, you know, the Rangers one, I find myself digging a little deeper. And JT Miller, now up to 14 points in 11 games with the Blue Shirts, another multi-point effort for him. Meanwhile, Elias Pettersson here with 3 assists in the 10 games since the deal. We're asking, did the Canucks trade the wrong guy? Blake Price.
They didn't. The farthest I can go on that is to say they are still mid-trade, maybe. Because maybe it's both guys. They're ultimately leaving. I think there was conventional wisdom. Not uniform, but I think a lot of people, majority, would have said, who's going to have a better run of games from the time of the trade on? I don't know. I would have guessed 70 or 80% would have said that JT Miller outscore Elias Pettersson. And even if you extended that to next year, in the next calendar year, who's going to get more points? JT Miller, I think it would have been at worst 50-50, if not still in favor of JT Miller. People knew there was still lots left in JT Miller. They knew he was more in form than Elias Pettersson. But this was a bigger decision than that, a longer-term decision than that. And I think still a lot of people are probably comfortable with how that part went down, even if they aren't comfortable with Elias Pettersson's current level of production. And even having Elias Pettersson stick around. I think that people aren't comfortable with that necessarily.
Yeah, the Canucks are playing the long game here. That much we knew when they were keeping the younger player. It's also important to note here that JT Miller wanted out, right?
Yeah.
JT Miller was no longer a personality the Vancouver Canucks were willing to accommodate. Now, the Canucks would be looking a lot rosier in terms of their playoff chase if Elias had produced over the last month, and he has not. If you want to argue the Vancouver Canucks would have been further ahead this season had they just kept JT Miller, I think you can make that argument. Look, Pettersson, O'Connor, they've done some nice work here. But this team is desperate for goals. A team that cannot score goals is sitting there watching its former number one center do just that. He's on a 6-game point streak. He's got 14 points and 7 goals in those 11 games.
He's leading the Rangers.
Yeah, 6 multi-point games, and they're clawing back in the playoff race in part because of his efforts.
They are first bridesmaid as we speak right now.
And only by virtue of an additional game played over the Detroit Red Wings. Miller was 9 goals, 26 assists, 35 points in 40 games with Vancouver. And while we all sit here and shudder at $11.6 million for Elias Pettersson for 7 more years, it should be noted, you came across this, yesterday? How things can change on the contract side of things. The Athletic, a top 10 worst contracts from 2022. This is just 3 years ago. Tyler Seguin, well, until he got hurt this year, is pretty darn good.
Above a point per game.
And has been good since this list came out. Everyone thought Seth Jones would be an anchor. He just went for one of the most promising goaltending prospects in the NHL and a first-round pick. And Spencer Knight with a huge night for the Blackhawks in his first win there. Darnell Nurse has had moments.
People say he's one of 2 Oilers that are having a better season than last year. Right. That list is Draisaitl and Nurse.
Colton Parayko is not being offered by the St. Louis Blues. They're keeping him. They're in a playoff push.
He was a hero of the Four Nations faceoff.
He played on a Canadian best-on-best team.
Yeah.
Zach Werenski's a Norris Trophy candidate.
He might just win the Norris this year.
And Nick Suzuki has blossomed in Montreal.
Having his best season yet. Mm-hmm. And incidentally, I mean, that's Don Lucian's model that came up with this, but Nick Suzuki has literally improved points-wise every single season he's been in the league.
And frankly, if Canada had fallen short, I think you would have heard a lot of cries out of Montreal. They should have taken Suzuki. And then there's someone who isn't on the list, but Jonathan Huberdeau's even bouncing back here.
Yeah.
Now, important to note, certainly not in every one of those cases would you relish the contract still, right? Like Huberdeau still has tons of term left. He's into his 30s.
But do you get something back, a notable something back for what you're investing in?
Or do you just get return from the player himself?
That's what I mean.
Who improves.
Yeah. That's what I mean. For your team.
What do you get on the trade market? It is potential that you can find moments. So, we're talking about Elias. We're talking about July 1st as a deadline because that's when the no move kicks in. But you were saying to me yesterday off show that you could go past July 1st, and if Elias does continue to struggle, if there are struggles at some point later in the contract, you have a heart-to-heart conversation where you go, it's not working here.
Swedish GM to Swedish player. Mm-hmm. What do you think? I think you'd be better off somewhere else. Right. You want us to look for you?
The change of scenery. Will you work with us on
that? They've played this card a lot, which is, there is a boy who cried wolf element to that. How many no-move clauses have the Canucks tried to outmaneuver here recently? And they might still be trying to do that here again with Carson Soucy. Mm-hmm. But the truth of the matter is we all know that is a possibility in today's National Hockey League.
Yeah. Our friends at Surrey Mitsubishi, speaking of trying to get EP40 back on his game, back to the top. So, every time everybody rallying around him at the dealership and beyond, every time EP40 scores a point, you save $500 the next day on any new or used vehicle. 2 points, it's $1,000. 5 points, it's $2,500. Dare to dream. You got to mention Sekeres Price, and the offer is valid until the next game day. Time to cheer EP40 back to the top. Score more, save more value, more savings. Bring them any offer. Surrey Mitsubishi will beat it. Visit 13820 104th Avenue in Surrey. Now, how about that?
Hello.
We're going to get to Brock Boeser here, but just Quinn Hughes was at practice, then left practice. I have Ambassador Paul screaming at me on Twitter going, Noah Strang is reporting that he left practice.
Yeah, everybody's reporting that now. 15 minutes at practice. He did line rushes, was with Philip Roenick. According to our own Jeff Patterson, said he very much looked like a guy who was battling something, even while out there. Did not look terribly comfortable, even though he went through the 15 minutes. But then he left, and he didn't come back. And practice is coming to an end.
Yeah, and this is, of course, a new injury outlined for Hughes. Well, not outlined, but a new injury beyond that oblique injury that he had been playing through, and, of course, the hand injury from earlier in the season. So things are getting pretty bleak for the Vancouver Canucks if you see the team making the playoffs. About a postseason run, because, of course, if you are going to be a giant killer in April, you absolutely need Quinn Hughes being a large part of that equation.
He needs to be 100%. He needs to be 100%, and he needs to be doing crazy things out there for the Canucks to have any chance of being a David versus Goliath.
Mm-hmm. Let's get to our top story, brought to you by Yellow Dog Brewing, Neighborhood Brewing, Foolish Winery. The last days of Brock Boeser, the last game for Brock Boeser. Question mark. Darren Dreger saying on Ray and Dregs today he's hearing the Florida Panthers could be of interest here. Of course, the defending Stanley Cup champions have put Matthew Tkachuk on LTIR. I'm not sure if that's the Las Vegas Golden Knights game or if that's legit. Nevertheless, the Panthers are all in defense of their championship, especially after making the trade for Chicago defenseman Seth Jones. And look, L.A., Ottawa, Utah, his home state, Minnesota Wild, although they made the move for Nyquist, Detroit Red Wings, New Jersey Devils. These are all teams that are either in the playoffs or the cusp of the playoffs who could certainly use some goal scoring. And as we know, Brock Boeser has been a good goal scorer in this league. He had a terrific playoffs for the Vancouver Canucks last season, and haven't heard much by way of contract extension talks. There were conflicting reports about whether or not the Canucks were going to come with a last and best offer to Brock Boeser. Some saying that was coming, some saying that they doubted it would happen. There's a lot of smart money right now on the fact that on the skew that the Vancouver Canucks are just going to keep Brock Boeser as an own rental, hope to make the playoffs, see what they can do this spring, and then are willing to redeploy Boeser's $6.6 million of cap space in the offseason.
So if I told you that Brock Boeser was being deployed most likely tomorrow night on line with the other most pedigreed winger, that they're loading up wingers on the same line, you'd probably think, okay, they're trying to boost Boeser's trade value. If I told you the center that they're playing with is Pius Suter,
well,
would you still think the same thing? Suter skating with
Suter
both Boeser and DeBrusk.
Suter's giving you more than Pettersson offensively right now.
For sure.
Also of it.
Let me finish on practice. Also on a power play unit that includes DeBrusk with Hedl and Lekkerimaki, the defenseman on that unit, Tyler Myers. Roenick is with Pettersson, Suter, Garland, and Höglander. I don't know who's PP1 and PP2 in those groups. No idea.
And doesn't matter.
They don't get many power plays, so probably not.
You mentioned Lekkerimaki, and of course many believe that the Swedish first-rounder will be the in-house replacement for Brock Boeser. He's got 19 goals in 32 games with the Abbotsford Canucks this season. As Dave Hall of Canucks Army points out, points in 9 of the 11 games since being sent down, and was a point-per-game player with 7 goals and 11 points in his most recent stint with the baby Canucks. And Rick Tocchet was talking about him Sunday at practice. They've sent down Surrey's Archdeep Baines to make room for Lekkerimaki. Tocchet was talking Sunday about Lekkerimäki and where the development needs to come. Here's Coach.
Talked about it, sure, 100%. Scoring. I know you guys. Everyone wants to score, but there's a lot of elements to score. It's just scoring. You have to have a grit to your. You have to have a great shot. The team doesn't just sit back. Oh, hey, this guy's a great shot. Let's watch him shoot it. You got to get in position to shoot. You got to get to the net to shoot. You got to attack the interior. You got to apply all the elements to score. So. Lekkerimäki's a guy that we're really trying to teach down there. Yeah, he's got a great shot, but he also has to get in the inside. He's got to be able to play that style of play. So when he comes up here, I think this will be his third time. If he comes up, and there's a good chance he will, hopefully he applies that inside game, which he can do. He's got a hell of a pair of mitts on him.
So there you go. The head coach foreshadows that he was coming up, and sure enough, that's official for Lekkerimaki. We're almost in the days of betting here, huh? Remember? There was a name to butcher, Jim would butcher it.
He said,
not that we bat 1,000 on that, but
he started to parse scoring. Scoring's not. Scoring's nice and stuff, but scoring's not just scoring. It is actually.
No, it isn't.
Yeah, scoring is scoring. If you're scoring, then you're scoring.
But Blake, you're going to score goals at the AHL level that are not going to be available to you to score at the NHL level.
No. I think what he's trying to prove is you've got to score the way I want you to score.
No, I think what he's trying to prove is you have got to be a more well-rounded player to play in the National Hockey League. You can't just be out there playing an individual game to score, to generate.
That's not what
offense.
I'm hearing him saying he doesn't want to see this guy shoot from the top of the circle. And I'm saying let him.
No,
let him.
He of course can shoot from the top of the circle.
That's not what he asked for in that clip.
He has scored goals from there. What he is saying is, let's not just be reliant on trying to score from the outside and distance, because those goals don't go in the NHL as often.
At this point, I think he has got to ease up on his mantra a little bit. They cannot score goals shooting 19 times on net per game. Time to start shooting from the tops of the circles and testing the theory that those don't go in, especially when you're as gifted a shooter as Brock Boeser, as Jonathan Lekkerimaki is, as Jake DeBrusk is.
As
shoot
Pettersson.
The damn
No,
puck.
and I'm 100% with you, but it's not mutually exclusive with making sure that this young man has a more well-rounded game than just being an outside shooter.
Let's worry about the Canucks having 20 of their shots blocked per night when that happens. Let's get to that point, and then we'll see them scale back.
He's taking a more holistic view with a young player, which is the right course of action.
If this was isolated, Matt, I would agree with you. It's not. This is the same stuff that we're hearing from him regarding other players. We got to do it the right way. Well, how deep are we into this season? And 1 year from now, basically, when scoring evaporated, you're the coach. This is not a short-term problem. This is now a 365-day-old problem. And if they're just not playing your system, you got to find a different way to get through to them. So I'm kind of done with Rick Tocchet preaching on what needs to happen for this team to be able to score. He's had a full year of this problem to look at it, and nobody seems to get it.
All right, so then who should he listen to, Lekkerimaki?
Listen to? Well, I mean,
his coach is asking him to play a certain way.
No, I'm not imploring Lekkerimaki to do anything. I'm imploring the coach to broaden his offensive scheme a little bit here, because what he's preaching now does not work. Proof is in the pudding over a long, long stretch of time here. Again, not 2 weeks without scoring. 365 days of not scoring, in fact, probably more like 385 at this point. Change it up, man. Find a new way to do this. Or get through to them in a different way. Something's got to change. It's not working.
Okay.
You disagree?
No, I just...
The evidence is there, Matt. You can't not disagree with it. It's factual.
They are not scoring enough. That much is clear. They are not generating enough offensive opportunities. Also clear. Mm-hmm. I think a large measure of that is your number one $11.6 million player is a total zero right now, offensively. I don't dispute that the system is repressive towards some offensively inclined players. But I also think he's got Jonathan Lekkerimaki's best interest in mind in terms of, in the National Hockey League, you can't just be a perimeter scorer. And those are we talked about this with Lekkerimaki earlier in the season.
And they said
he's getting inside more. That's fantastic. He's going to the traffic, to the dirty areas. That's fantastic. Why? That's where NHL goals are scored. AHL goals can be scored off the perimeter.
If this was the first
NHL goals are going to be scored a little tighter to the net with less time, less space. That's the adjustment that virtually every player in the history of the league has had to adopt.
If this was the one and only time he'd said what he said, totally fine. But as a broad rule for every player on his team, I don't agree with it.
All right. We spent some time last week going, wow, we're really getting along these days. There you have it.
Yellow Dog Brewing's got the High Five Hazy IPA. It is a hazy, crazy, tropical fruit explosion. And after listening to Matt talk, I need a bunch of them. Slightly cloudy in nature with a super soft mouthfeel.
Slightly cloudy in nature.
Yes.
Very appropriate, Blake.
This beer is then loaded with a plethora of hops to give it strong flavors of grapefruit and stone fruit. Bright, fresh, and vibrant. Unlike the Canucks offensive scheme, this hop elixir will have you racing to the end of the glass. Find it in your local liquor store.
Should Mike break the tie here? You want any part of this smoke?
My mic's not working.
Cam Robinson will have him on the show a little later. His most recent tweet on Boeser. We're back on Boeser here. This is the guy who has scored at the NHL level, has gotten inside, has found a way to score myriad goals, not just from distance. I do believe the Canucks are actively talking trade on Brock Boeser with a number of teams, but from my understanding, they haven't decided against keeping him for the playoffs. Still a chance they meet for one last extension discussion as well. This one seems too tough to guess at this point. We'll talk to Cam here in a bit. Irf Gafar. It wouldn't be surprising at all if the Canucks kept Boeser past the deadline. From Vancouver's perspective, they still believe they are a playoff team, and that's important. After the 5-year offer that was rejected, Boeser camp now just waiting on what Vancouver wants to do. So this goes beyond Brock Boeser. To me, this is a bigger, more existential question for the Vancouver Canucks and this management group, specifically Jim Rutherford. If you're, and we'll get to Scott in his super chat here in a second. Our super chats are always open here on the YouTube side of things, folks. So by all means, hit that super chat button. We'll get you involved in the program, and half proceeds going to the BC Mental Health Foundation on all super chats. Here's what I mean about Rutherford, though. Rutherford is accustomed to being a shot caller. He was very much that in Carolina. In fact, I think at one point even had equity in the franchise in Carolina with Peter Carmanos as his owner before things went off the rails there between the two of them. And in Pittsburgh as well, before you had ownership change and you had people from on high who got a little meddlesome. Jim Rutherford, you'll remember back a few years ago, the narrative was, he's coming to Vancouver. He's going to be the buffer against ownership's meddling, and this is a guy, Hockey Hall of Fame, that Francesco is going to have to listen to and be the guy who charts the course of the franchise. We all know how important playoff revenue is to Francesco. We all know how much of a pride issue it is for the Canucks and Francesco to make the playoffs. And it's not necessarily coming from a bad place, right? Like, he wants to reward his season ticket subscribers. He believes that, the Vancouver Canucks should be a playoff team every year, and that's noble. If there's a great deal for Boeser, even if it's a futures deal, and ownership squashes it because we've got to do everything to make the playoffs this year, how do you think that goes over with 76-year-old Jim Rutherford, who, yes, has signed a contract extension, but would in a way be emasculated in terms of how he wants to drive this franchise? Like, I wonder if this would be the straw that breaks the camel's back Because you may have noticed there's still no practice facility, right? Jim was talking about having that done at the end of last season, and it hasn't happened.
He signed this extension when?
Oh, it was back in the fall, wasn't it? Summer, fall.
And you think by that point he couldn't predict the eccentricities of his owner?
No, I think he knows the eccentricities of his owners, but I also think that for the most part that the Vancouver Canucks have done exactly as Jim Rutherford has wanted. If this deadline is the first demonstration of ownership exerting its privilege, I wonder how that's going to go over with a 76-year-old. I hear his family likes it here, but I'm not sure Jim is, needs.
But what do you think, Jim? What do you think Jim wants to do here? What do you think Jim is dead set on doing on this trade deadline?
No, I'm just saying if they feel they have a good deal for Boeser.
Yeah.
Remember, Cam told us he thought it could be a first-round pick and an A/B level prospect. So whether you take that now and immediately try and go out and redeploy it to get help, or whether you're just going to some degree, punt on this season.
I think you're like the deal matters.
Sorry, the extension was a year ago, January.
Like the deal matters. Like if you're getting a prospect back, like a Lekkerimaki level prospect with a first round pick, a guy that is like Lekkerimaki, right on the cusp of jumping into your lineup. I think that's a really easy one to explain to your owner and a really easy one to explain to your fan base. It just depends.
I'm just saying, and Friedman is saying there has been some movement on Canucks UFAs here. We went through the exercise last week. Boeser gets you a first and a prospect. Suter gets you a second or a third. Soucy gets you a third or a fourth. Forbert gets you a fourth or a fifth. Like suddenly 4 additional draft picks and a prospect to go about and try and improve your club for next season, including get that second-line centerman, that top 2 centerman. I can understand how a big-picture manager might view that as attractive. I can also understand why an owner would say, well, except for we're punting on this season and I owe it to my customers not to punt on this season. If you get that sort of divide philosophically, is that something that Jim Rutherford wants to hang around for at 76 years old, already in the Hockey Hall of Fame? I don't see that already with Stanley Cup rings.
I don't see sweeping selling.
Like you may have noticed, people don't tend to last a long time in the Aquilini's.
I think both Rutherford and Aquilini want to win now, though. Like I don't think there's a diversion.
I don't dispute that either. But needless to say, much has changed for the Canucks. Like, you can't tell me that Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin are sitting in a room and going, if we just get one forward, we're a cup contender. Like, they see the evidence on hand.
I without a doubt, God, you'd hope. But I do think in their minds, they think.
Like, Jim's interview with Gary Mason was very much forward-looking about we may have to change the balance of this team. We may have to move out a centerman. And then go about and finding that centerman in a different manner. So, he's looking at recasting. He's already talked about how he may have to recast, retool the core here to get them back where they hope to be, and that's contending for a Stanley Cup. So,
I don't
and
think
many
you're
at
going
the
to
time
see.
Thought that was messaging to Francesco to make sure that he could make a JT Miller trade and not have ownership interfere.
I don't think you're going to see Boeser traded, Soucy traded, Forbert traded, and Suter traded.
I don't think so either.
I don't think you're going to see even 3 of those. But if you did see 3, I can guarantee you there would be 1 to 2 NHL-ready bodies acquired, maybe in those transactions or immediately subsequent transactions. There'd be 1 to 2 more bodies at least coming back. So in their minds, they actually wouldn't think that they're any worse necessarily than they were going into the trade deadline. Mm-hmm. That would be my prediction. I don't think they're going to be net negative in terms of their skill.
And I wonder why that. I wonder, frankly, if that's why Elliott is hearing more things on the UFAs, that Francesco put his foot down and said, no, we're not moving Boeser. And it's like, okay, well, let's see what we can get for Suter here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get the Suter trade unless you can show me that there's a real worth. Like the Canucks trading Pius Suter right now for a third-round pick does not move the meter for the Canuck medium term, long term, or short term. Like it really doesn't. Well, it does for the long term, I suppose.
It does.
Medium term and short term, it does not. Like that player is eons away, and the third rounder in and of itself, that asset, not worth a ton either, given that he is amongst the leading goal scorers on this team.
I hear you.
So like I
don't think you're wrong.
I just don't see much wisdom in it.
Well,
much benefit.
As for their draft capital and Canucks Army with the post here. So they're shy one pick in 2025. They have 6. Its full complement is 7. That is the third-round pick that is missing. They're 2 picks shy in 2026, missing a third and a 7th. They have the full complement of 7 in 2027, albeit no second-rounder and an additional fourth-rounder. So they're draft capital light in each of the next 3 seasons.
He's third on the team in goals. Pius Suter. So
there's also the point of view, like his value's never been higher.
I mean, if you get a late first-round pick for him,
well,
maybe you can get my attention.
So, I mean, look, there are centers available, but they're costly. Brock Nelson is going to cost a pretty significant return. And incidentally, did you see David Pagnotta reporting that a screaming match broke out between Lamoriello, his son, and some of the scouts in the Islanders meeting?
Shocking.
Well, and apparently the reporting is that the Islanders have just now come to the conclusion that, okay, maybe now we'll sell Palmieri, Nelson, and some of our UFAs. Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Like, Lou may have a Stanley Cup ring stuck in his ears, but gosh, like, what's going on? Scott Lawton in Philly, and he has term left. Flyers asking for a first-round pick, and Dreger saying a first-round pick is out there for him. Jake Evans just resigned in Montreal as a center iceman who was available at the deadline. Middlestad has a lot of term left here. Colorado not happy with him. But when you start to do the process of elimination, Blake, about who's a rental center iceman on a very digestible contract.
You need no cap space for Pius Suter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You need none.
Zero cap space required for a guy who's playing well. Ryan Donato would also be on this list for Chicago, right? He's a pending UFA, $2 million. We just saw Trent Frederick moved by the acquired by the Edmonton Oilers from the Boston Bruins. That was a second and a fourth-round pick, and Edmonton also had to move a prospect to Jersey to shelter and broker some of the money there. So I'm just looking at it and going, okay, center icemen who are available, if you don't want to take on term, if you don't want to pay the heavy price to take on players with term, you've got Donato, you've got Suter if he's available. Yanni Gourde is out there, but he makes 5.1, and he's on 16 points through 35 games. Yanni Gourde, in fact, let me update that, but he's not necessarily going to be the offensive contributor that Pius Suter is. Yeah, 16 points in 35 games.
Suter wasn't a massive playoff contributor, but he won them a game.
Yeah, he did. So, look, we're just spitballing here in front of the deadline because that's what the deadline is about, right? Like, you will have front offices who are having all sorts of conversations now. I think it's Dreger who tells us every year, should have heard some of the things that were kicked around and didn't happen each deadline, right? Like, because there is a lot of noise, a lot of discussion relative to the actual transactions that you see on trade deadline day. Let's get to the super chat here. This is from Scott.
Yeah.
Hey guys, on a lighter note, how good would the Canucks look in an updated white skate jersey? They'd look great. They'd look absolutely great.
Well,
they're practicing in the blacks today. Is that it? Is that where this is coming from?
I think if the summer is not a good one for the Vancouver Canucks, like if they don't get to a lot of business,
It's a great distraction.
then little distractions like that, like hey, we're bringing out the white skate, will do wonders.
With some of the color schemes and people are seeing around Rogers Arena, you do sort of wonder. We've talked about this in the past. It's what the fans want, whether you go full scale back into the black skate jerseys. Okay. As mentioned, Dreger said to us yesterday, there are centers whose names are not out there on trade boards that the Vancouver Canucks are poking around on. So, look, we've talked about Casey Middlestad in Colorado. His name is on trade boards. We've talked about Dylan Cozens in Buffalo. His name is on trade boards. Ryan O'Reilly in Nashville. His name is on trade boards. Jean-Gabriel Pageau on the island out there as well. There's Blake Sky Rossi in Minnesota.
Seems unlikely. They're loading
Seems
up.
unlikely. They're loading up, and he's a good young. He's having a terrific
On a hell of
season
a
now.
contract, too.
Whether or not he's Bill Guerin's cup of tea at his small stature for center ice, we'll see. But I wouldn't think by the trade deadline. Is Kotkaniemi a reasonable guess here?
Yeah.
Yesterday
maybe.
we guessed Josh Norris in Ottawa, and look, I don't think Norris is available right now unless you blow their socks off because they're looking to make the playoffs for the first time. It's been a very fallow period there. You got a new owner. They really want to make the playoffs. But my friends in Ottawa tell me Norris for futures in the offseason could very well happen because the Senators have to surrender either this year's first-round pick or next year's because the administrative mistakes on Evgeny Dodonov's no trade clause. Most people think they will surrender this year's because it looks like it's going to be mid-round in what many consider a weak draft, and you don't leave yourself exposed to the bottom falling out next year and losing a lottery pick. So we talked Norris yesterday. Rossi, we talked. I do wonder about Kotkaniemi. Not that I think you can call him a top two center.
By the way, Friedman did bring up on 32 Thoughts Rossi lately and said that he questions his future.
I think so. I think so. But just, with the season they're having, do you want to cut it? I mean, maybe.
So Canucks Army just did a piece on all this. Did you really?
Well, I saw they did one.
Zaka? Pavel Zaka?
Yeah. Well, I was going to bring up the two guys in Boston, Zaka and Coyle.
Yeah.
Because Boston made a declarative statement today, right, by moving Frederick out.
New Jersey's not in a good way. Dawson Mercer?
Yep. Well, he's been one that Canucks have been tied to in the past. Does he figure as a center iceman long term is the question there. But Coyle is absolutely a center iceman. Zaka is absolutely a center iceman. Zaka, 2 years left after this one at 4.75. He's a big guy, too. Modified no trade there. And Coyle with 1 year left after this one at 5 1/4. Zaka has a 10-team no-trade list right now in his contract, and Coyle has an 8-team no-trade list.
Zaka's a little bit of the Hedl idea that we were talking about. Like, he's never going to be a top-line center, but 2-3 guy for sure, and if you have enough of them, you're probably a pretty good team.
Yeah. Lastly, I wanted to throw this at you. We began this season talking about the Vancouver Canucks derby is the Edmonton Oilers. That for the forthcoming years, it's going to be how do you get through Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, and the Edmonton Oilers in the Pacific Division and Western Conference. On top of all the shames of this season for the Canucks, I think you can also add that Edmonton is gettable this year.
Yeah.
I mean, they turned out to have a dreadful summer just like the Canucks.
Defensively, goaltending.
Still an incomplete team in goal prevention.
Yeah.
Have to go out and make this Frederick trade. I mean, the people were howling yesterday at the Edmonton Oilers are looking for a forward with size and speed and a defenseman that can play both sides. And everyone's going, you had that in Holloway and Broberg.
Also, just lather, rinse, repeat. They've been saying that for so long.
So, yeah, I mean, Vegas is good this year. Many of us thought Vegas would be good this year, bouncing back off the playoff disappointment last year when, they got a little too big for their britches, putting Stone on LTIR thing. You just drop them back in the first round and everything would be hunky-dory. It wasn't. Vegas has come back. They look like a very good team. Again, Winnipeg is having a sensational season, but I sit here and I wonder, boy, if it had actually worked out for the Canucks this summer, and if Pettersson and Miller could have just gotten along and both of them played at even a reasonable level, even if it wasn't the level of last year, even if it wasn't a career high level, what we would be saying about the Vancouver Canucks and their chances to contend in the West this year. Alas.
I was just thinking the other day, like, we all predicted some regression. Remember, they had, 109 points last year? 108, 109? Mm-hmm. We all thought, okay, probably 104, 105 at the very least, maybe down to 101 for some people. Mm-hmm. We all predicted regression. Like, they're going to have to work their tail off to get to 92 points this year. Mm-hmm. To get to 92.
Yep. Well, we did talk about it a little bit in training camp the preseason, Blake. Like, there was a world where the bottom falls out. And one of the things we cited was that Elias Pettersson and JT Miller are not cool. And the other thing we cited was Thatcher Demko's health.
Ding, ding, ding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You can join the Daily Face-Off live trade deadline day. They get going at 8 a.m. Of course, we'll be on at noon and then followed that night by Jeff Patterson and Rink-Wide Vancouver after the Canucks and the Wild. Let's get to today's menu. It's brought to you by Greta, a fantastic spot to catch all the games, home and away. A lot of activity in the Stadium District this weekend. Why not head over pregame, postgame to 50 West Cordova. Check out the great street food menu. Of course, the arcade that encircles the bar. Weekly drink specials. Greta Bar, let the games begin. We'll talk to Cam Robinson here today of Elite Prospects on Boeser, on the Canucks deadline approach, on Susie, and other matters. John Shannon also going to stop by. We'll talk to him about what the Canucks need, what the approach is, and, of course, on our Surrey Mitsubishi poll question, Miller, and how he's churning for the New York Rangers right now. That's all coming up.
I saw somebody point Miller's shooting 35% with the Rangers right now.
Yeah, I mean, unsustainable, needless to say.
Yeah.
But even beyond that, he's playing good hockey.
Yep, he is. He's playing like JT Miller plays.
He's been a catalyst. He has been a shot in the arm for a Rangers franchise that earlier in the season, they're getting skewered by the Larry Brooks and others going, they're just playing with no emotion, no life, no zest. Well, enter JT Miller. He's going to bring emotion and life and zest and other things too.
Mm-hmm.
Time now for our Bet365 Bets of the Day. This segment brought to you by Bet365, proud partners, Sekeres and Price. We both lost yesterday. I was on the Islanders. You were on the Lightning. Mm-hmm. I'm going to take the Predators in Boston tonight. The Bruins trade Trent Frederick. They signal to the room that they're selling. Marchand, like Frederick, is out right now, but rumors swirling there. That has to be distracting with the longest tenured Bruin, of course, Cup champion, Four Nations champion. I can't imagine many guys in that Bruins room are feeling safe right now outside of the guys with full no moves, no trades. So I'm going to take Nashville at plus 110 with a little value on the road at the Toronto Dominion Garden in Boston, Massachusetts.
The Minnesota Wild have done the opposite. They've added already, showing their room, we believe in you. You guys can do this. They're on the road versus the Kraken, who just walloped the Vancouver Canucks, and I'm going to guess they feel pretty contented with that. Not that they don't want to win tonight, but I don't know that the fire's in the belly at this point. They got a big win over their regional rival. I don't know that their fight is going to be in it. Wild plus 100 in Seattle.
Open an account with Bet365 today. Bet on a huge range of markets. So, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code NATION when opening that account. Cam Robinson coming up next. Sick Harrison Price from the historic Wall Center.
This segment brought to you by your Pacific Toyota dealers who want you to experience that new fandangled Kunika Minolta Champions Club at Rogers Arena. They've got a contest to send you to the Canucks and Golden Knights there on April the 6th, along with 2 Canucks jerseys. Check out the link in our episode description. Follow Toyota Pacific on Instagram and Facebook at Toyota Pacific for your chance to enter a contest open to residents of BC and the Yukon age of majority. While we've got Toyota on your brain, though, have you seen the BZ4X, the newest addition to their electric lineup? 100% electric. That means you're in the HOV lane, no matter how many people are in the car. You're passing by the gas stations, and you get to just go take one for a test drive. We can give you all the superlatives. We've taken one for a test drive. It is a gorgeous car. Do yourself the favor and do the same. Check it out at your nearest Pacific Toyota dealer.
Cam Robinson is the director of content for Elite Prospects. He joins us Tuesdays. How are you?
I'm doing well, fellas. How we doing?
Yeah,
Good.
very well. Exciting week here.
Yeah.
We will start with your latest tweet on Brock Boeser. I do believe the Canucks are actively talking trade on Brock Boeser with a number of teams, but from my understanding, they haven't decided against keeping him for the playoffs. Still a chance they meet for one last extension discussions as well. This one seems too tough to guess at this point. Yeah, Cam, any update from there, my friend?
Nothing official. I'm told they haven't met to negotiate anything. I mean, it sounds like they haven't really been at the table in a while either. That, the reported last offer was 5 years at $8 million, and that was weeks ago, and it was rejected, unsurprisingly. This is his last big crack at a long-term contract, and if he goes to free agency, it's expected that he'll have, a number of teams very interested in offering him a 7-year deal, and then you can get a little bit of a bidding war, and maybe he ends up with 8.5 or something like that too over a 7-year deal. So I think his camp that they are very much open to staying in Vancouver and that they might take even a bit of a haircut on that term, maybe drop down to 7, maybe even drop down to 6 years if that cap hit it makes sense for them long term. I think he would prefer to stay in Vancouver. But up to this point, the Canucks, they were pretty steadfast at 4 or 5 years, and so we'll see if they want to move the needle up to 6 and if that gets it done. But they've had all season, and now we're down to just a couple of days. It would have to be one of these at midnight signings. I do know his name is out there, that teams are calling, Canucks are listening, they're open. Nobody's obviously offered something that's knocked their socks off, or else the deal probably would have already done. But everything comes back to this team wants to make the playoffs. They want playoff revenue. You trade Brock Boeser, that's going to diminish that unless you quickly take those assets and flip them for a player. So, like I said, I think all options are on the table. If I was betting, I would say that Brock's probably here past the deadline, and then we see what happens. The worst case scenario is he's here past the deadline. They don't make the playoffs, and then he just walks. That would be disastrous. But at least if he can if they can make the playoffs and he can maybe do a little something, maybe there's still some time to get that extension done before July 1. But at this point in time, it's too close to tell, I'd say.
The market for him, when you look at the comparables, Ryan Donato's got more goals and points, but doesn't have the pedigree, doesn't have the playoff pedigree that Brock Boeser has as well. I mean, he has to be at least on the podium for forward rentals this season. I mean, do you think the market is going to show up here for Brock Boeser and at least tempt the Vancouver Canucks?
If they decide to fully go with it and be like, okay, we're going to sell Boeser, I think that they should become sellers at that point. But I think that there should be a market for him. I mentioned it last week or the week before, is that I had talked to some teams and just kind of asking, like, what do you think the value would be on a Brock Boeser? And they, everybody kind of said, like, starts with a first round pick, and then you look at a young player or a young prospect attached to that, or maybe it's a quality second round pick and a couple of good young players. Something we saw Jake Gensel go for last year, 4 prospects and a conditional first that turned into a second. Obviously, Gensel has a better resume than Boeser does, but we could look in that kind of realm too. If it's not a first, it's a second plus. So I do think there is a market for him, and I do think that if you can't get him, if you're not going to move on the term, and that's just a decision you've made in-house that you're not comfortable paying this player deep into his 30s, then you absolutely have to probably just get the best that you can out of it. And now if the best that you can get out of it is a third round pick and a prospect, then I guess you can justify not doing that and hoping he has a good playoffs, and maybe you're convinced to move up and give him the 6 years. But I do think that, centers go first, right? The top rental centers, the top rental D, and then he would be the top rental winger on the market at this point. So yeah,
it might be a little armchair. Sorry, it might be a little armchair GM to say you trade Brock Boeser, you get futures, and then you use the futures to acquire something else. But we've seen proof. This administration has done this twice already. They don't seem too afraid of having future assets in their pocket for a day or two before they flip those assets around for something else. I mean, is it possible they could do something like that again?
Absolutely, it is. And like you said, specifically this management group has shown us, twice that they're able to do that. I just not reporting it whatsoever. I know that Alex Tuch name is out there. The Buffalo is open to moving him if the price is right. The price is high, but he's got a year left on his deal after this one at less than $5 million. Would they trade Boeser and then flip him for a guy like Alex Tuch, who a big body, skates really fast, can score, can play the middle, can play the wing, kind of fits Rick Tocchet's system of play. Looks like he'd be a good playoff performer. We haven't seen him since his Vegas days, but something like that I could see them trying to pull off. Although the Sabres would probably want, rather than pure futures, because they have so many futures, they want more of a younger now piece, which Vancouver doesn't really have to give. So unless they can convince him on Nils Höglander or something like that. But yeah, I do think that is absolutely on the table. And I'm sure that they're considering that as they're getting those options and then talking to teams. Would you be interested in this or this that we could potentially get in a Boeser trade? So they're creative in that regard. I think it's all about winning now for this group and this ownership group. So that's why I think that the end of the day, I think Brock's probably still in Vancouver past Friday.
Do you think he makes sense in Florida? They've emerged here with all this cap space because of the Matthew Tkachuk injury.
Absolutely. And that would be a great pickup for them, to then have Tkachuk come back into the lineup and have Boeser as, a secondary scorer on that team, someone who has shown up in the playoffs. Be a great landing spot for him. If he did go there, I think that would be a really great spot for Brock. Florida, they don't have a ton of assets to move at this point in their evolution of their cycle, but they could probably put together a package that would be comparable to what some of these other teams might be looking at giving.
Dreger told us yesterday that he's hearing the Canucks are looking for a center with term and guys who haven't been on trade boards. Do you have any guesses there, Cam? And what do you think the odds are that, much like the Philip Roenick deal of a couple of years ago, we get hit with the thunderbolt here from a Canucks management group that surprises us with a name that hasn't been circulated?
Yeah, I'm hearing the same things, that they're not shopping for rentals, which makes a lot of sense, especially where this team is at this point in time. Is that if you're going to add, you'd probably want someone with term. So not reporting these names, that this is what I'm hearing they're looking at, but just spitballing with some people is that Michael Rasmussen. We know that they've had some interest in him in Detroit, big 6'6" forward. Played the middle of the ice a couple years ago, hasn't been playing a lot of it this year. Morgan Geekie, 6'3", right hand center, having a career year. He's an RFA this summer, but you still have team control on a player like that. Colton Sissons, another guy, right-handed center, really good in the draws. He's got one more year at 2.85, something like that, if they're looking for more of those depth Cs. I don't think they're involved in Scott Lawton, who's kind of with the rental center market being pretty light this year, that a lot of teams are really interested in him. I think that probably ends up out east and maybe in Toronto, something like that. Dylan Cozens. Right, we know that they had some interest in Dylan Cozens with that Elias Pettersson rumored package coming back with Bowen Byram. I think that the Sabres they're open to moving him. That he hasn't been told hey, we're not moving you. You're part of our plans long term. That he could be moved this week. He's getting paid $7 million a year. He had that great year. He signed the big extension. Then he's kind of struggled. But so a new environment, a change of scenery could really unlock. Still really young, former top 10 pick. I think he went 7th overall. A really high character, and he does have a load of skill. So among kind of the younger players that have term down the middle, he's probably the most talented and would be a really excellent fit long term for Vancouver.
Why does he have his haters? What do you think the hating is about Dylan Cozens?
he's getting paid $7 million a year and he's not producing. And that's
Yeah.
an easy target, right?
Yeah.
But is he 24 yet even? He's still,
just
he's
turned
still
24,
quite,
yeah.
just turned 24. Yeah. So he, I loved him as a prospect. I loved his quick evolution into the NHL. So I do think that there's untapped potential there yet, that this could still be a player that could consistently put up 60 plus points in NHL seasons and potentially end up being kind of like a matchup guy for you in all situations too. So, but what's that going to cost, right? Is that they're not going to give him away. They recognize his potential as well too, but something needs to give in Buffalo, and they recognize that this core is not working. And they have loads of young pieces and pick some prospects. And so they need to shift some things up, which is why they're listening on players like Cozens and Alex Tuch and potentially even JJ Peterka, which I think would be crazy to move off of him myself. But if anyone could pry him out of Buffalo, I think that'd be a steal.
And do you expect any of the smaller pieces of the Vancouver Canucks to go out the door? You mentioned Nils Höglander. I mean, I don't know that this
Suter, Susie.
Yeah, there's the UFAs and Forbert and stuff too. I mean, do you think that they will pull the trigger or anything like that?
I was told that Carson Soucy is that like actively team and agent they're trying to facilitate something. I think that if that does happen, it'll happen, right close to the deadline as teams, miss out on better options. And they're like, okay, we still need depth. And, he has had a history of being a strong, bottom pairing guy who can chew up 15, 16 minutes a night and be physical and clear the net front. And so that's playoff hockey type of stuff. And so I do think a market might open up for a player like Soucy as we get closer to the deadline, even for just like a mid-round pick. If they weren't searching for a center, Boeser, it's like that would make sense to parlay him, but their center is just so bleak, right? It's really light right now after the Miller trade. So I wonder if they just end up holding on to him. I think that they're looking to soft buy rather than soft sell, but we might actually see a bit of a combination of both, which I'd be okay with too, because it's a seller's market right now. And so for all these teams in the mushy middle, there's an opportunity to be had here to take some of your pieces on expiring deals, or even guys that have a little bit of term left, and getting a little bit above market value for them, because there's just so few assets on the table right now. And that's kind of why we're seeing it's a slow week thus far. In previous years, we've seen a lot of the deals made in the days leading up to the deadline, and then deadline day is quiet, and we still have a little bit of time, but it seems like it's pretty quiet out there right now.
Well, the Oilers pulling the trigger here today, maybe that sort of gets things going a little bit and lubricates the wheels. Canucks calling up Jonathan Lekkerimaki in exchange for Archie Baines. Do you think this is a long run here? This is just to spice things up, or do you think they say, you know what, we need goals, stay here for a few weeks, see what you can do?
They need goals. You nailed it, right? They are struggling to score goals, and this kid is a goal scorer. And so I've been saying it all year, is that you handle him with care. You bring him up, you put him into a spot to find success, hopefully, see if he can get rolling. If it falls off and the minutes drop off, boom, right back down to Abbotsford. But, if they can put him into a position to kind of jumpstart some things here, it's a lot to ask of a kid, but he does have that one-shot goal-scoring ability that they so sorely lack on this team right now, especially while Pettersson is seemingly allergic to shooting when he has open space. I think that they're willing to give him an extended leash in a promising position in the lineup until he proves he can't handle it.
Let me just ask you, Cam, getting back to 1 foot in, 1 foot out, do some selling, do some buying. Is that wise? Is there a case for punting on this season?
If I'm calling the shots and I have ownership's blessing, yes, I am. I'm not adding anything to this roster. I don't think that they have earned the right to be given the benefit of the doubt that they should be given help to finish this year off, versus a team like Columbus, who everybody projected to be in the bottom of the standings, and that they have proven all year long that they're capable of being in that playoff mix. And now you reward that by going, okay, we're going to sell some of our futures and give you guys a boost because of what you've done. Is that I think it's the opposite in Vancouver, and I absolutely would punt this year, but that's in a vacuum, right? You're not going to have ownership blessing. You're not looking to waste a heart level season from Quinn Hughes, right? But just everything has gone kind of against him, right? The Demko injuries, the Pettersson stuff, the Miller drama, like it's just it doesn't seem like the magic is there right now to sacrifice anything. And I think that they recognize that too, which is why I say that they're looking to soft buy. And I think whatever pieces are bringing in, anything can change in 10 minutes. But the pieces they're probably looking at aren't going to be real needle movers, but more depth pieces coming in, and then maybe a couple depth pieces going out, and you're just kind of shifting the deck a little bit.
Lastly, buddy, our Surrey Mitsubishi poll question. I'm sure you've seen what JT Miller is doing on Broadway. We're asking, did the Canucks trade the wrong guy?
It's a fair question. The guy's shooting 35% since he landed in New York, right? Like it's inflated. He's a good player though. We know he's a good player, right? There's a reason he put up, 99 points, 100-point seasons in Vancouver as a point a game guy. He's a good player, but he's also 31 years old, or will be, right? It's when you're faced with that decision between him and Pettersson, you had to consider long-term value. And I still cannot believe that a player of Pettersson's caliber at 26 years old has simply forgotten how to play the game. I think that it's part injury and part between the ears, and both those things can be fixed through different means. So it was going to hurt having that end up being the dressing room, having that rift and something having to happen. Regardless of what they did, they were going to probably take it on the chin. And so I think that they still moved out the right guy. It might just end up being that neither were the right guys to stay.
Yeah. No, that could be a fair shout as well. Well, a busy week ahead. Cam, thank you for your efforts here. Look forward to next week already.
Thanks, fellas. We'll talk soon.
If you are struggling with things like managing stress, anxiety, relationships, or divorce, reach out to the counselors at Advanced Counseling. Book your free initial consultation today at advancedcounseling.ca.
Sekeres Price from the Historic Wall Center. This next segment brought to you by Resurrection Spirits, introducing the Sekeres and Price Gin. We got a gin. It's made in East Van. Using BC ingredients, it's a gin with character designed for those who appreciate the art of true craftsmanship in every pour. It's in our color blue, cobalt.
Yeah, it is. That's right.
And when ordering, and this is a limited edition bottle, once they're gone, they're gone. Get them while you can. You go to resurrectionspirits.ca, and then you use code SNP for $5 off, and that's the and symbol. Ampersand.
Buy local. Buy Canadian.
Absolutely.
By Resurrection.
Resurrection Spirits. Here's John Shannon, his show, 100% Hockey with Darren Millard, the former executive producer of Hockey Night in Canada and the most famous man from Oliver, British Columbia. How are you?
Just a minute. I've got to log on and buy a bottle of gin.
Yeah. Yeah, gin season's coming too.
I don't even drink gin, but I'll buy it for you guys.
Good. Thank you, John. Thank you for supporting. We'll let everyone know at Resurrection Spirits. Hey, what are you anticipating out of the Vancouver Canucks between now and Friday?
Well, how is Quinn Hughes? I think that might dictate a little bit of what's right or wrong with Vancouver and trying to figure out what they need to do. I still think that they need to find another goal scorer. When you get rid of one like JT Miller, you have to replace the goal scorer. So they have to find a way to get a top six forward somehow to get some goal scoring back on this hockey club. That to me is the most obvious thing. I don't think there's any issue on the blue line anymore if Hughes is healthy enough. But at the same time, I think that they do need to find a way to get more scoring.
They aren't apparently going to get aggressive in the rental market. What do you think? Players with term, do you think they're available here?
I think there are some available. That becomes the issue. The other thing is saying you're not involved in the rental. That's on Monday or Tuesday. That may change by Thursday. If there's a ton of pressure, and I think the three of us would agree, there's a ton of pressure to get this hockey club into the playoffs. They may not win the Stanley Cup this year, but as well as I do, there will be a demand from many people on many levels in this organization to get into the postseason. When you consider that a home date at Rogers Arena is probably north of $5 million, you need to find a way to get into the postseason. And I think that that's the biggest pressure.
Yeah. On that, John, first round gates are pooled, right? Between the teams. No. It's just the other revenue sources that come on in.
Well, I mean, it's all hockey related revenue, Matt. But at the same time, the Canucks are in much better shape if they have home games in the postseason, and they're able to get, whether it's their food and beverage, whether it's they have to share their per caps when it comes to souvenirs and memorabilia. But you're putting more money in your pocket if you have a home game in the postseason.
For those that want the Canucks to buy and get into the playoffs, how much of that is slowed down by the fact that there are 6 chase teams within 5 points of the playoffs in the Eastern Conference? By comparison, there's only 3 that fit that criteria in the West. Everybody feels like they're in it except for Pittsburgh and Buffalo in the East. So is everybody buying at this point?
Well, we saw the Boston Bruins start to sell today. So the answer is there will be some general managers, as Steve Yzerman has been the last couple of deadlines, that become pretty pragmatic about where their teams are and what they need to do. And is it more advantageous in the long term to start to sell off? As again, I think Don Sweeney has finally realized that.
Philly, I think, is probably there too. Yeah.
Well, Philly has admitted it from the beginning. Philly has admitted it from they are in the sell mode. Keith Jones told us on our show 2 weeks ago, we will always be in the sell mode this year. Don't worry. Don't pretend to think you know what's going to happen in Philly, because they are going to move, and they already have moved people out in order to try to prepare for the next 2 or 3 seasons. I think Buffalo is probably in the sell mode as well. So there are going to be enough teams out there that you can go and cherry pick and find somebody to help your squad to get into the postseason. I think Seattle's in that boat too.
Seattle with Gord and Tanev, Brandon expected to be dealt. I'm sitting here.
Maybe Alexiak goes too, guys.
Right, Alexiak is fair. His name has been out there too, John. Good catch. John, I sit here and I digest this Edmonton Oilers trade with Boston for Trent Frederick, and I look at this Oilers team and I think to myself, because remember, fellas, at the beginning of let me take you back to September and October, Mr. Shannon, when we were talking about the Vancouver Canucks in the vein of the Oilers are your derby, you have to get over Edmonton. As I sit here and size up the Oilers 3/4 the way through, I mean, they may have had a worse offseason than the Canucks did. That if the Canucks had actually done it, hit it this offseason and in season, we might be talking about a gettable Edmonton Oilers team, or a more gettable Edmonton Oilers team than some might have perceived. A thought or two about where you think the Oilers are and what the Oilers can be, and whether this is a chance wasted for the Vancouver Canucks to get past the McDavid-Draisaitl club.
Well, I think it's a chance wasted by the Canucks, period, at this point.
Fair.
But we're not in the postseason yet. This has become a league of get in and win. Can something happen in the next 4 days that changes people's opinion? Or can finally some people on the Vancouver Canucks pull up their socks and play the way they were supposed to play, or get healthy enough and be a difference maker? I mean, so I think it might be just, Matt, a little too early to suggest that. That said, the Edmonton Oilers did not have a good offseason. And Stan Bowman, and by the way, let's not throw it all on Stan Bowman, because they went through a little bit of a bridge between Kenny Holland leaving and Stan Bowman showing up that probably caused a little bit of disconcern, or concern rather, for the organization. They got a little tougher, and which tells me that Evander Kane's not showing up sooner than later from his injury. Trent Frederick is a tough customer and can really help the club when he's healthy.
I was going to say, we'll see when he gets in the lineup.
Yeah, right. And that's part of it. The other one is the name on the trade that might fascinate a few people, because I remember him as a junior, is Max Jones. This guy, if he's given an opportunity, might be a difference maker. Not prolific, but he may help. He might, have some quality improvement to the depth of the organization in Edmonton. He went to Anaheim with such great pedigree and then kind of just disappeared. I don't know why. I don't know how he disappeared. And by the time he got to Boston, he spent most of the year in the American League. So Max Jones could be somebody that could actually, I think, at some point, help an organization that really has never been able to compensate for the loss of Dylan Holloway. And that's, they tried Matt Savoy in the last 3 or 4 games to see if he could fill that void. I think that's just an experiment that we'll probably see Savoy go back to Bakersfield. But Max Jones could be somebody that could fill that void.
Nobody's having a prolific season in the Pacific Division in terms of the teams. The best teams by points, the top 2 are both in the Central. Albeit the Jets, as great a year as they're having, until you've done it, you haven't done it. The old get in and anything could happen. Could you make the argument this is a year where you'd be tempted to think that? Not so much from the Canucks. I think people here are jaded by what the Canucks are to some degree. So we can even just extract the Canucks out of that argument. Just objectively, generally speaking, does this look like a year that's ripe for, hey, anything could happen, given that it's a Jets team that has always had trouble advancing in the playoffs?
Totally. I really believe that. I mean, there have been indications that, there are upwards of 10 teams that could win the Stanley Cup. The moment you say 10 teams winning the Stanley Cup, the standings aren't that important at this point. It's being prepared for the middle of April that becomes important. There's a chance still that Colorado, it's just a chance, Colorado could be a wild card team. Based on what Colorado's done, do you want to face Colorado in the first round? Not a chance. So the get in and win mentality, I think, is probably more prevalent this year than it has been for the last few.
Who are you expecting big moves from between now and Friday?
I actually think Winnipeg will make some moves. I really do. I think Winnipeg feels that they need to bolster their second line center and something on the blue line. I think Toronto needs to be able to do that. When you think of what Florida's done, you think how well Tampa is playing. The Maple Leafs, who are 8-1-1 in their last 10 games, and still aren't in first place now, last I checked. I think that Brad Treliving is going to feel he has to do something in order to get over the hump. There's a ton of pressure in Toronto this year, not just on Treliving, certainly not on Berube, but on Brendan Shanahan to have a difference of a season this year in order to try to make sure that they can do this again.
You have long been bullish on the Canucks playoff chances. Talk to me about Calgary and Utah, 2 teams in their orbit. We keep hearing that Utah, it's a new world order there, and they're going to get
the Blues too
aggressive. But Craig Conroy, of course, has already made some moves this year, including that big deal with Philly for Frost and Farabee. But you talk to me about Calgary and Utah and whether or not you think they're going to be aggressive by Friday.
Here's the thing. I don't think Calgary's going to change its plan. I think Calgary's going to stay the course, and if they can do a deal, it's going to be a trade that helps them for 2 or 3 years. They're not in the rental market, I don't believe. I think that Craig Conroy is sticking to his plan. I think ownership is going to make him stick to his plan, and so therefore I don't see Calgary doing anything really drastic to help their roster. I think any trade that happens in Calgary helps them 2 years down the line. And I think that's their philosophy, and that's what they're going to do. Utah's in a different boat. I think what you'll find again is that there's an owner there in Ryan Smith that wants to make sure that they're having fun in Utah. People are enjoying hockey in Utah right now, much more than they're enjoying the basketball team, I can assure you that. And so would I be surprised that Billy Armstrong makes a move and tries to do something? He's done a good job of creating assets in draft picks. So I would not be surprised to see Utah do something that tries to get them over the top. And then, as Blake brought up, St. Louis, the loss to Dallas on Sunday night was their first loss since the break in regulation. And the Blues are playing very good. Binnington and Hofer are very good in goal. They're getting a lot of quality play finally out of guys like Robert Thomas and Braden Shen. So the question of who's going to leave, well, they're this close to the playoffs. I'll be surprised if Doug Armstrong does anything drastic now, particularly after the success of the last 7 days.
You referenced
and Conroy, just for context on Calgary, Conroy is actually in a pretty enviable position because outside of Dan Vladar, he doesn't really have any UFAs to be with value. So, he doesn't have to move anyone out. And as you say, he can look entirely big picture long term without sort of the. But
you referenced the plan in Calgary. What's the plan? Like, you've got Huberdeau and Kadri in their mid-30s and signed for 5 more years. Like, how do you get around that plan?
Fair.
4 for Kadri, like 17 more years for Huberdeau. Like, it's not promising for. I don't know how Conroy extracts himself from this and starts to turn the page.
Well, I do think that he's accrued some assets. I do think the young guys that they got in Frost and Farabee from Philadelphia are a start of that. Would I be surprised to see one of those 2 guys move at the deadline? No, but that's not helping them make the playoffs. That's building for the future, Blake. That's what that's doing. You do have to wonder if people are going to knock on the door, particularly for Kadri, who does have playoff experience, is a champion, and can Conroy get a king's ransom for Nazem Kadri, even though he is signed long term? And by the way, by the time the cap gets put into place for the next couple of years, Nazem Kadri's contract might actually be reasonable.
No, the contract is fine. It's just he doesn't get younger with the cap going up. Right. That's the problem.
But again, Craig's not. My point was, I don't think Craig's out there doing something to say we're going to make a trade to get us over the top and into the playoffs.
Right. And has no pressure to sell his UFAs also. So, yeah. Lastly, John, and you were a huge JT Miller fan every time we brought his name up. I'm sure you're seeing what he's doing with the Rangers. We're asking our Missouri Mitsubishi poll question, did the Canucks trade the wrong guy? I know it's very early, but would you be sweating it if you were in Alvin and Rutherford's shoes?
I think they knew that when JT Miller left, that JT Miller was going to be a factor for the Rangers. I think it would be silly not to assume that he was going to be a quality player in an environment that allowed him to succeed. New York has allowed JT Miller to succeed. In fact, based on what you've seen, you wonder if this isn't JT Miller's team already. That's the amazing thing. The other centers, like Mika Zibanejad, is now playing better, but JT Miller kind of drove the boat to get Zibanejad going. I like the Canucks. I've always thought that the Rangers would make the playoffs, even though Chris Drury seems to be selling team players off. I think that there's probably going to be information we'll never know, Matt, is if they did try to move Pettersson, what was the return? And we just don't know what the return was on a Pettersson deal. And at first blush, if you had to make and get rid of one of the two, it made more sense to get rid of the older guy. It did. It made more sense. Pettersson is one of those guys that if he went somewhere else, he could haunt you for a decade. A decade. JT Miller, I don't think would haunt the Canucks for a decade. He's going to haunt you for the next couple of years, but I don't think he's going to haunt you for a decade. Remember, this is a guy that bounced around. Did it bother Tampa that JT had success in Vancouver? Last I checked, I think they won 2 Stanley Cups when he wasn't there. So it's one of those ones where hindsight is, get rid of Pettersson and keep Miller. I just don't know what they would have got for Pettersson because of the contract.
Alrighty, sir. Well, big day Friday. Looking forward to it. Thank you for your efforts here, and look forward to catching up next week when the dust has settled, John.
Let's hope the dust settles. That's the thing. The dust, by the way, it's the Vancouver Canucks. The dust never settles.
Never settles here. No, never settles
Dust
here.
Bowl. Perpetual.
But you get yourself to resurrectionspirits.ca, get one of those S&P gins, okay, and it'll make your Friday a whole lot better.
Yeah, there you go.
Order on Rush.
I don't drink gin, but I'm buying it for you guys.
That's much obliged.
Appreciate it. If you are struggling with things like managing stress, anxiety, relationships, or divorce, reach out to the counselors at Advanced Counseling. Book your free initial consultation today at advancedcounseling.ca.
Secure some price from the historic Wall Center, and if you are heading to a game in downtown Vancouver, make it a staycation. Book your room here at the Wall. Call 604-331-1000. Ask for the Secure Some Price rate. Some blackout date supply based on availability.
Roll Up to Win is back.
A Canadian institution.
I was just going to say, now is the time to hold up and cherish, embrace Canadian traditions and Canadian institutions. Well, Roll Up to Win at Tim Hortons fits the bill. You could win millions of amazing prizes just by swiping with your thumb. You can get unforgettable vacations from Sell-Off Vacations, $1,000 racket and cash prize, all-new electric 2025 Volkswagen ID Buzz, and, of course, many coffees, donuts are won as well. But you only have until March 23rd. It's already March 4th. Time is just blazing on by. Play Roll Up to Win on the Tim's app today. Rules apply. Canada only. Canada
only. Did you see that meme earlier? Canada has two modes. I'm sorry, and you're about to be. Wow. Speaking of Canada, Canadian international Sam Adekube of Vancouver Whitecaps FC, Coach Jesper Sorensen, says he hopes it's not too serious. It is a quad injury. Quote, he will be out for sure for a while. How long? I don't know. He missed 28 games last year, Sam did, with a calf injury and knee tendonitis, all but assured now to miss that Nations League semifinal against Mexico later this month at SoFi Stadium. Really, really too bad. And, of course, for the Caps, that's a pretty big blow as well. He not only scored on the weekend, but he's a good, versatile player for them. And they got a big week ahead, of course. The round of 16 CONCACAF Champions Cup against FC Monterrey tomorrow, Wednesday at BC Place, and then Saturday versus CF Montreal, an all-Canadian derby in MLS regular season play. And then Glass City is updating some of his reports. Bild, the German news organization, is saying that Hamburger, the Bundesliga 2 side, isn't interested in moving Polish midfielder Łukasz Poreba in this window. He notes, Glass City does, it sounds like a negotiation ploy. They bought him for 750,000 euros from Lens in the French league, so they're looking to recoup investment.
Lens or Rennes? I think he corrected himself.
Yeah, he corrected Rennes to Lens.
Okay, there we go.
How do you think they'll do without Adekube?
Well, if they can get Savvy back in the near future,
this is the newcomer.
That would really help. They've got enough guys. They've got two wingers now in Nelson and Ocampo that can, masquerade as a right back or left back, depending on where they want to put Laborda. So I think they can get through the interim time here, but. Yeah, it's not ideal. The good news is...
we should just say we haven't seen Sabby yet. He has been hurt. This is the Italian-born addition from
probably another week away, I would guess,
right.
from rejoining training even. So
yes, he has played internationally for the United States. He also played in the Danish league, of course, where Jesper Sorensen plied his trade.
On the Canadian men's national team front, though, Alphonso Davies was at training today for Bayern.
That's great.
So
that's fantastic. We were worried about not having him against Mexico
as
well. And, it's
16 days away. So I would think if he's training today, that means he's probably got the green light.
Do you know if has El Tree made any strides since the last meeting, the last World Cup?
Yeah, they're mildly better than they were at that point. Yeah.
Because there would have been a time where Canada needed every single one of their best players and on form to even have a shot. But my, how things have changed.
To be honest, in the last few matches, the best player on the pitch is Jonathan David, not Alphonso Davies. Like Jonathan David has done more for the team than Alphonso in recent Canadian men's national team games. So I think they can be fine without him. Obviously, it'd be better if he was there.
Forgot to mention this last week, but how about Vancouver FC? Of the CPL, a couple of transfers here already this year. North Van midfielder James Cameron being transferred to the Colorado Rapids of Major League Soccer. And this after Surrey's Grady McDonald was transferred to Club Bruges. It's a big club.
Yeah, their academy,
in January. Mm-hmm. So well done for the development out at Vancouver FC with a couple of local products. McDonald plays internationally for Ireland. NFL T. Higgins franchise tagged for a second straight year by the Cincinnati Bengals. Look, they got off to a terrible start last year, and then Joe Burrow started playing like a league MVP. They said their mission was to keep the band together. So Burrow, Higgins get a contract extension for Jamar Chase, re-signed defensive end Trey Hendrickson. We'll see if they can get that accomplished. But sounds like Higgins is going to stay there for one more year, allowing Cincinnati to focus on defense and offensive line in the free agent period and the draft. Dallas re-signing defensive tackle Osa Odigizua, taking one of the best UFAs off the market, would have been one of the top defensive tackles available. And word out of the NFL Combine is that the New York Giants are looking to trade up from number 3 to number 1 with the Tennessee Titans to select University of Miami quarterback Cam Ward almost instantly after the Titans got the first overall pick, and there's a new general manager there. Word started circulating that no, they didn't fancy the quarterbacks in this draft. They were looking to take one of the best players available, whether that's Penn State edge rusher Abdul Carter, Colorado corner / wide receiver Travis Hunter, the Heisman Trophy winner. So perhaps a deal to be made there right at the top of the NFL draft next month.
There's a lot of Cam Wards around. I think we need to put an initial in there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't think it's a
common name.
It's not fair.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of Kobe Bryant's around too.
Yeah, as we covered. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Poll question results. Surrey Mitsubishi poll question results from Monday. We asked you, who do you want traded by Friday's deadline? The options were Brock Boeser, Elias Pettersson, both or neither. What won the poll?
Boeser.
Both.
Really?
Yeah, they angry. 36% said both. Boeser got 25% of the vote, just ahead of Petey at 24%. 16% said neither. Pucker, Glenn, both. No way this team can afford an $11.6 million gamble and hope Petey can find himself. This is not his first slump. Boeser scored 40, but he's never been a difference maker ever since his rookie year. He's not getting quicker.
So over 80% of respondents wanted one of.
Yeah, 84%. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Grant, EP's value will be highest after the season. Despite no production, they'll want to keep him around for a playoff push. Boeser's value is now. Love him as a longtime Canuck, but if they can't sign him, he's the one to move before the deadline. I think Grant is in line with you and I. Jeremiah, I'd trade Elias Pettersson in a heartbeat if I was the GM. He's becoming another Louis Eriksson. And Xerxes says neither, but if they can't re-sign Boeser, it has to be done. Errors and omissions, I'm self-reporting. God, soccer and all the leagues and the cups and the name changes. It is CONCACAF Champions Cup. I have called it CONCACAF Champions League, which it used to be, and which you argue they should have stayed with, lest anyone draw a parallel with UEFA Champions League.
Yeah, it's the same, right? You want to do that. It was Champions League.
That was good brand confusion for you, CONCACAF. What are you doing?
Crazy.
My ESPN app, when I go into the individual sports, it has more soccer leagues, more soccer cups.
Yep.
as separate tabs.
A lot of games.
Yeah. Anything else? Anything from the
No, nothing there.
All right. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Appreciate you spending some time and connecting with us. Please do subscribe to all our assorted channels, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Follow on social. That's X, Insta, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, Blue Sky, live on many of those platforms, noon Pacific time weekdays. And, of course, support the community sponsors you hear us telling you about. Keep it local.